All right, guys. So as I was talking about concepts and laws, so we say concepts are just certain ideas that we use based on this particular topic. Certain ideas that have a certain depth of understanding that will be explained as we go along. So we are going to look at what we call fundamental concepts and some laws in physics. All right, so we have these are the following concepts that you will probably come across more frequently. You will see the idea of length, force, mass, current, pressure, voltage, time, and weight. And these are all things that we are able to measure in the physical world. So these are some concepts. Now, in the physical world, in order for us to make sense of it, we really need to collect data about the things that we are studying in the physical world. Now, there are times when we might need to measure the length of something. We need to know how much mass there is in a particular thing. We need to know what the force is. We need to know pressure and current and so on. Now, because of that, physics has many devices that we use to measure these things. So as we move along, we'll become familiar with the measurement of the various concepts that we're looking at, and you will become familiar with some of the devices that are used to measure them. All right, so let me see the hands of those who are familiar with these concepts. And if there's any there that you see, but you have heard of it, but you're not quite sure about what it really is, let me see your hand and then I'll try to explain them for you. What about length? Is everybody clear on what length is? Raise your hand if you are. Okay. Anybody else who doesn't understand length? All right, you can lower your hand, Miss Nelson. Miss Morris, is there idea about length? You are clear on what length is? Are you hearing me, Miss Morris? All right, I know Miss Morris having a little difficulty with her connection. So I guess when she hears us, she will respond. Are you there now, Miss Morris?
Yes, sir, but I keep getting kicked out. I don't know why.
Yeah. Which area are you, Miss Morris? You're in St. Mary's.
Pardon me?
Are you in somewhere in St. Mary?
I am, sir.
Okay. I know there are times when the connectivity is a little difficult from that side for some persons. But
Okay.
let's see what happened throughout the course of this class, and we'll see what happened next class. All right, so the concept of length. Are you good with that concept, Ms. Morrison? You clear on it?
You had explained them, sir?
Length.
Did you explain anything? Or
No,
are
I
you
did.
just asking me
I
about
did
it
not.
in just in general?
Right, I'm just asking in general.
Yeah, it's somewhat, sir.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Okay.
The length is clear, self-explanatory.
Okay, so length has to do with measurement in some distance, preferably in a straight line. All right, so everybody should be okay with mass because we had discussed mass when we're looking at definition for physics. What about pressure? Are you familiar with what pressure is, anybody? Ms. Nelson, can you give us an idea of what pressure is?
Sir, I'm unable as I'm trying to remember.
Okay. All right. Rather than try to actually remember what you would have learned from previous lessons or from a previous class, can you just say in your own words what you think it is, Ms. Nelson? Are you there? Are you thinking about it?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. Miss Mars, anything come to your mind?
Sir, it has anything to do, pressure, it has anything to do with the force that you put towards something.
Well, it has to do with some force, yes.
So it's applying force to get something done or move something.
Okay. All right. It has to do with applying force over a particular area. So if it depends on the size of the area over which a force is being applied, the the smaller the area, and if the area is smaller, the force will create a greater pressure over that area. So an example would be, you know, if you have like a dull point, let's say you have a pencil which is not sharpened, and you put it on the surface and try to push against whatever it is that you're pushing against the pencil, you'll find that dull surface or that flat surface would not really pierce the surface easily, right? But if you should sharpen it into a very sharp point pencil, then you might find that the point may pierce the surface. So the smaller the area of the thing is that you're applying a force to, it may have a greater pressure at the point at which the object is meeting the surface. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So as we go along, we will actually see example of how these work. What about current? Everybody know anything about current?
In my opinion, current has to do with electricity.
All right. Well, actually, yes, it's a type of electricity. What about voltage?
Voltage is also a type of electricity.
Well, voltage is really an energy that applies to electricity. So it's an energy. What about the idea or the concept of time? Do we understand anything about time? What do we know about time? You want to tell us something about time, Miss Morris? Anything that comes to your mind? Are you there, Miss Morris, or are you just thinking?
I am thinking, sir, trying to think in the realm of physics.
Okay. Mr. Arthur, you need to get your mic fixed so that you can interact with the class. All right, sir? Because it's a little bit awkward to have you in the class and you're pretty much silent and we don't know if you're following us, if you're understanding or what. All right, Miss Nelson, do you have any idea about that you can share with us about time?
My understanding is that time has to do with hours, minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. That's my opinion.
All right. Now, you ever thought about where the idea of time came from?
No, I haven't.
Okay. All right. So when you learn the physics of these things, then you will understand a lot more and you will see some deeper meaning behind these concepts. Because oftentimes, as I say, we see these words and we kind of treat them in a layman form and they really have more depth to them than we are just giving them credit for, all right? But these are some concepts that as you go along in the physics, you will meet again, all right? Moving along. Laws are principle. What are these? Just to give you a quick definition. Laws are principle. Principles may be defined as relationship that exists between concepts which summarize a large number of facts. Can anybody interpret what this is saying?
All right. In my opinion, and my summarization, laws or principles that govern a certain topic, and when you're doing that topic, like you'd have to do it in the order that the laws appear.
All right, you remember when we were referring to the law of gravity? And if we are to talk a little bit about gravity, what is gravity really, students? What is gravity? You heard about the gravity phenomenon. On a day-to-day basis, you might come across objects falling to the ground. And we say gravity is that force that keep pulling object to the ground. And we see even when we try to jump, we get pulled back down to the ground. There's always that force keep on pulling us back to the surface of the ground. Unless we are of a certain kind of weight, we may probably float around, but once we are of a certain, and I will clarify what really happened there, right? I know I don't want to jump the gun and go in depth with all of these things, but think about the law of gravity. What are some of the concepts you think would surround gravity? Based on some of the concepts that we would have seen just now, what are some of those things around gravity? If we have a falling object, what would happen when the object fall? What concept would come into play when the object falls? If you have it at a certain height and you let it go, what concept would come to your mind? Think about the concept that you just saw just now. Let me just backtrack with the slides. Here they are. So what concept here you think would relate to gravity?
Sir, would weight be one of them?
All right, yes. Weight will relate to it. What else?
Mass. I think mass would
Mass,
relate.
right. What else?
Pressure.
Length,
Length.
right? Because
Mhm.
height is length in a vertical way. That's about not pressure. Pressure wouldn't really have anything to do with gravity, but you would have force
But
here,
force.
and time also would relate to gravity. So we have here would relate to gravity. Length, mass, force, time, weight. So 5 concepts would relate to the law of gravity. Now look at law or principle may be defined as relationship that exists between concepts which summarize a large number of facts, right? So here, if you were to interpret this, we are talking about the law of gravity. The relationship with all these concepts, the weight, the force, the time, the mass, these would give a summary of what's happening with gravity. Is that clear, Miss Nelson?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Take off your clothes and go shower.
All right, Miss
Take
Morris,
off your clothes and go shower.
as we were
Yes, sir.
talking about the concept of weight, force, time, and length and mass as it relates to gravity, can you see how all of those concepts would relate to give you the law of gravity? Because you would have to
Yes, sir.
pull an object up to an height, and then you would have to start pulling it down. That force happened to be the weight. And when it pulls down, it's going to fall at a certain speed. That takes into consideration the time. Right?
Time.
All of those concepts could pull together and show a relationship that would summarize the whole law of gravity. So we say a law or a principle may be defined as a relationship that exists between concepts which summarize a large number of facts. So that would be an example of a law, and well, law and principle kind of use similar in circumstances. We could say it's a principle, we could say it's a law, and because a principle is really a particular either way in which something is done. The law would be similar in the same respect. All right. Is everybody getting the idea of what we mean by law or principles? Based on the example of the law of gravity, would you get that idea of what a law is? So a law is a what? A relationship that exists between concepts which summarize a large number of facts. All right. All right, so as we move along, I hope these ideas will soak into your mind a little bit. Now, the word hypothesis. You may have come across this word before. Can anybody give me a definition for hypothesis? Ms. Morris, since you're on the floor, let me ask you.
Sure, thinking.
Thinking. Ms. Nelson? What do you think?
All right, I think that hypothesis is a statement that is not necessarily true, but is not necessarily fake.
It's not
It's kind of
necessarily
your opinion.
it's not necessarily true, and it's not necessarily what?
Not true.
All right. All right. So it's really an opinion. All right, give me an example of an hypothesis. Can anybody give me an example of an hypothesis?
Sir, based upon what she says just now and what you said, it is an opinion. So, for example, it is that you're doing an investigation on maybe a frog or something to see, or maybe I'm not using the right example, but you're doing an investigation on something. So the hypothesis would be like the starting of the investigation, but not the completion of it.
Um,
I don't know if that makes sense.
well, I wouldn't say exactly that, but I kind of understand what you're saying, but it wouldn't fully be that.
You're old.
Yes, you're a little off in the sense. I understand what you say, the starting of it, and I'm going to explain it so that it is clearer in your mind. Because I think you have the idea what is happening, but I think you're not expressing it well. What about you, Nelson?
All right. In the case of hypothesis, I think it's an opinion, as you stated. For example, if I'm saying that, hey, the government is good, and Miss Morris is saying that the government is doing good, that would be our hypothesis, because that is my opinion versus hers.
All right. Now, I like the idea that Miss Morris had mentioned in an investigation. Now, why do we investigate something? Why do we investigate something? Generally, when we are investigating, we generally have what? We have some kind of problem that we are looking at, and we are investigating to find out something. So why do we investigate something?
All right, we investigate something to find out the truth, based on my opinion.
Yes, so it really is about finding out the truth. Now, sometimes an hypothesis is referred to as an educated guess, right? Some persons may say an hypothesis is an educated guess. In that context, what do you think the educated guess would all be about? Ms. Morris?
Yes, sir.
All right, let me create a scenario. Let's say that you were traveling along the road somewhere in Port Maria, and you saw when you reach on the scene of an accident. You were not there when the accident happened, but when you went there and you saw the state at which the vehicles were in after the accident. Think in terms of an educated guess. What kind of guess you would make?
Well, the fact that you will be able to, you will be at the scene, you might not have seen the physical accident itself, but from what you're seeing, you can draw maybe the conclusion to say this is how or what had happened.
Okay, but you see, drawing a conclusion would have to be a lot more than just merely seeing just a few things. You would really have to collect a large number of data Because first and foremost, you probably might want to interview persons who actually saw what happened, right? From those persons, you could collect some data of their account of what took place. And you might have like probably 10 persons that might have seen the action. You might want to interview them. And based on what they're giving you as information, you want to come to a truth. But before we actually do the investigation, your hypothesis would be an opinion of what you think happened based on your brief encounter with the accident. So your hypothesis is not really, it's an opinion. It's not necessarily what really happened, but it's what you think happened. And chances are you could be right, and chances are you could be wrong. So oftentimes, when we are carrying out an investigation by way of experiment, we are often asked to come up with a hypothesis. Guess what really wrong, or guess what caused something to happen. And so you would have come up with that thought of what you think happened, and then now that would be your hypothesis. So you don't know whether or not your hypothesis is true or not, but you may want to test your hypothesis. And how do we go about testing an hypothesis, Miss Nelson?
All right, in my opinion, best way to go and test an hypothesis is do your investigation, and based on your analysis, you could make your opinion and use that as your hypothesis.
All right, so when we are carrying out an investigation in terms of science, generally what do we do? What do we call our investigation? When you go to a lab, what you go there to do?
When you necessarily go and you collect specimen.
Yeah, but what do you call the whole process of what you're doing in the lab?
Data collection. That's my opinion.
What else you know the whole process of the investigation? What do you call it? Let me hear what Mr. Arthur is saying. Repeat the question. What do you call the investigation that you carry out in the lab to test your hypothesis? What you conduct when you go to the lab? Ms. Morris, help us out.
Can you please repeat? Sorry.
What when you formulate your hypothesis and you go to the lab to test your hypothesis, what do you conduct?
Well, when you form a hypothesis, that means you would have collected some amount of data already.
No, man.
So you big.
Nope. Your hypothesis, you don't get any data yet. Your hypothesis is your opinion in your mind before the data. So you make
Okay.
as
So
one.
you will be doing. So as I said, we'll be go to the lab. I guess we'll be doing some data collections to see if we can come.
But what you going to collect the data from?
If there are specimens, I'm not sure in terms of if it is I'm not sure, sir. Maybe some specimens or something.
It's
Not
one
sure.
it's one specific word I'm looking for now. One specific word. It's not so hard. What the science
Not so sure.
in the lab, students? What do they do? What they carry out?
Testing,
What you call the testing that they carry out?
experiment,
Experiment. That's it, the thing. You go to the lab to do an experiment. And your experiment is what you use to test your hypothesis, right? So you really don't know whether or not what you guess or what your opinion is. You don't know if it is true. But what one would hope is that you're making a guess that makes sense. And that's why you call it an educated guess, because you want a guess that makes sense. So maybe just by the way how the thing look or the position of the things, even though you don't collect any data, you might say, you know, I think that is the blue car wrong. And then now, you will now have to investigate, why do you actually say the blue car wrong? So now this is where you're going to collect the evidence to support why you say the blue car is wrong. And so when you carry out an investigation in the lab, you're setting up an experiment, and the experiment going to either create the scenario of what happened, and then you play it back out, right? Now, experiments are done for many reasons. When they were actually making the vaccine for the coronavirus, they had to do experiments with the drugs. They had to administer drugs to people, and some of them have to be exposed to the virus to see whether or not the drug works, and so on. So once the experiment is that you would apply something. When you're doing an experiment, now you apply something, and then now you